Damaged Defenders by Sherza. Chapter 88. Steve Nidvalier, Part 2. And who were the others? Besla wanted to know. Steve hurriedly tried to wipe the grin off his face. He hadn't meant to laugh, but good heavens. Besla had sounded so much like a disapproving mom right then. Steve had kind of wanted to check over his shoulder for his or Becky's mom out of reflex. Loki looked pretty amused, too, as he turned to introduce the rest of them. This is a soldier of Midgard. He was recently very poorly done by and suffers from amnesia that is slowly improving, enough so that he insisted on coming with us. Given that Thor hadn't quite gone into that much detail, Steve sort of wondered why Loki had, but it could be as simple as the difference in audience. These are Stephen Rogers and Anthony Stark, both also of Midgard and two of its defenders, the leaders, in point of fact, of one of its premier team of defenders, and the ones coordinating the defense of Midgard. Oh, good. I was hoping someone who knew Midgard would be involved in coordinating, Besla said. We know our own people and our own capabilities, but virtually nothing is known of Midgard, and what little is known is, at best, several hundred years out of date. That would be mildly troublesome even among the rest of the realms, where lifespans number in the thousands of years. For Midgard, where lives are, were at one time, so much shorter. Besla waved a hand expressively, then sat forward. So, we shall discuss your realm, gentlemen, and then we shall see where my people can be of the most help. Right about now, Steve was really glad they'd visited Svartalfheim first. It had given both him and Tony a frame of reference for comparing Earth's defensive capabilities compared to those of other realms. We don't have any protection to prevent anyone from getting on the planet, Steve admitted. We've only been out in space for about 50 years? He glanced at Tony, who nodded. And we've not gone personally further than our own moon. But we've sent constructs all over our solar system, and even out of it to explore and signal back what they found. Besla nodded. We do, though, have a lot of stuff to protect ourselves once someone's in our atmosphere. We've got personal weapons that equal or better the damage, all but the heavy-duty magical dwarvish personal weapons, Steve said, and a very, very large pool of trained soldiers to use them. Our population is a couple orders of magnitude larger than any of the other realms, at 7 billion people. And that number still blew Steve's mind. 7 billion? Besla echoed, looking stunned. Yes, ma'am, Steve said. And how many of that number are trained soldiers? Besla wanted to know. No exact idea, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 million, Steve told her, having got that statistic from Tony before they'd started on this trip, just in case. With a whole heck of a lot of other folks who aren't trained as soldiers, but are fully capable of protecting themselves at the very least. And a lot of those will want to step up, given what we're going to be facing. Excellent, Besla said. I commend them. Now, have you any thoughts as to the disposition of the forces that will be joining this battle? Some, ma'am, Steve said. We're figuring on putting the Jotuns along our coastlines, plenty of access to water to fight with and keep themselves cool, and in cold and snowy areas like mountaintops and our north and south poles. The dwarves will be in charge of the space side of the fight, as they have the largest fleet and the most experience with such battles, though they'll have some humans aboard their ships to guide them around the system, since we know it better than they do. Besla nodded. And the rest of us? Haven't quite got that far, ma'am, Steve admitted. From what Thor and Loki have told us, pretty much everyone gets along, except the Jotuns and the Asgardians, and that's easily enough dealt with. Though I think you and your people would be more comfortable in our less populated areas. Fewer small people underfoot and less stuff to accidentally break. Besla actually chuckled at that. My people will appreciate that, she agreed. Would we be permitted to bring animals trained for transport and fighting? Steve thought about that one a minute. I don't think there'll be much of a problem with it, depending on what it is you're talking about. Though if it's just transport of stuff you're worried about, we can work out something for that. More like transport of ourselves, so we can move swiftly from place to place as needed, Besla said. Our version of the Asgardian warhorse. Ah, Steve said. Then yeah, that shouldn't be a problem, unless they can't eat earth grasses or whatever. bringing enough food to feed them for however long this fight will last might be a problem in that case. Agreed, Bessel said. Now what is your world like? That question made Steve cock his head to the side a bit as he tried to figure out what exactly she was after. Then he said, Loki said Midgard is a lot like Vanaheim, for whatever that's worth. Lots of different climates, topography, animals, and such. If your people would be more comfortable on flat ground, we've got a couple sizable chunks of ground like that will be need protecting. That would perhaps be best. My people are unused to great heights, Pesla said. Steve nodded. That will actually help us a lot. One of the most heavily populated areas we need to protect is fairly flat ground, and there's a lot of it to protect. That being most of Asia. The mutants could cover the Himalayas and a handful of smaller mountain ranges. The rest of it would be pretty ideal for the Nidavellir, and certainly more vulnerable in terms of the likelihood it'd be attacked than the African savanna. Steve hated thinking that way, but there was no avoiding it. Even if Thanos' goal wasn't the most deaths possible in the least amount of time, the savannah wouldn't be all that valuable as real estate to conquer. While it was close to Wakanda and might look like a good spot to launch an attack on that nation from, according to Tony, that had been tried in the past with no success. Thanos might be good, but Steve had seen the Chitauri in action and they left a lot to be desired as troops. Hey, Tony, give me those maps, would you? Steve asked. Tony produced the paper maps from somewhere. Steve had asked him to get some of each continent so they could show the various leaders what was where. Holographic maps would have been better, but Tony hadn't yet developed a mobile holograph setup like he used to build stuff with. Steve fully expected for him to figure that out before the year was up, and Steve was only giving him that long because there was so much else they'd have to do that it was bound to slow even Tony down. Otherwise, Steve would have bet on it being a month before Tony came up with something. Steve sorted through the maps until he got to the one for Asia. Right, this is the area I'm thinking about. There's a really tall mountain range here. He traced the line of the Alps, and a couple shorter mountain ranges here, here, and here. He pointed out the various areas, but that leaves a lot of relatively flat land. More importantly, this area, and this area, he pointed to China and India, have roughly half our planet's population. Well, a bit more than half, but still, point made. Which will make those areas a prime target for that soulless monster, Pesla said with a nod. And what of the defenders in the area? Both areas have individual militaries. In this area, he pointed to what had in his day been the Soviet Union, but was now chopped up into smaller countries he hadn't had a chance to memorize the names of yet. Has several more. Our planet isn't yet unified under one government, he admitted, but I can guarantee they'll all at least protect their own when the Chitauri come pouring down on them. Bestla blinked at him in surprise. You have come so far and are not yet united, she asked. Steve nodded. To be honest, ma'am, I think it's the fact we're not united that has allowed us to get so far so fast. We sort of compete against each other. Gotta prove we're better than the other guys, Steve said. He both did and did not approve of that attitude. He approved because good healthy competition never hurt anyone. He disapproved very strongly because folks had a bad tendency to take it way too far. That would provide impetus, Pesla agreed. Aside from the regular soldiers and other folks with training but who aren't soldiers, Midgard has some folks with unusual abilities. Not too many just yet, but those we've got and know about are being mobilized. People with unusual abilities, you say? Pesla said. Steve tried not to glower at her because she had a tone and a look on her face very similar to what he'd caught on Frigga when the subject of mutants came up. Like they both knew something but weren't going to tell. He didn't get the sense they were being malicious, which was the only reason he hadn't said anything to Frigga, whom he knew better and thus felt marginally more comfortable with the idea of confronting her. Still, it was frustrating and annoying knowing information of some sort was being withheld. Yes, what they could do varies widely, but they're scattered all over. We're hoping to assign at least one team, preferably more, of these people per area. Your area is one of the ones that'd have two teams working it, one led by a fellow named Shiro Yoshida, the other led by a fellow named Mikhail Rasputin.
At minimum, whoever is going to lead your people in the fight needs to come to Earth at some point to meet them. We'd prefer for as many of your fighters and ours as possible to get a chance to learn to work together. Whether those practices take place here or on Earth is something we'll have to figure out.
Bessler smiled at him. I have no issue with our people learning to work with yours, though the first practices at least ought to take place here, where my people can more safely display their full capabilities. On Earth, we would have to take care not to damage things during the practices.
Steve nodded. Good point. Damage won't matter much when the fight starts, but it's best to keep it minimal until then. And your people constantly having to restrain their strength wouldn't give our people a good idea of what you can do.
Steve shot Tony a look. Head cocked. Tony nodded. They'd discussed with Bruce the possibility of Hunk eventually working with the Nidavellir, since they were apparently of a size and strength level with him. Bruce had eventually said that if the Nidavellir were friendly, the two of them could bring up the possibility and see if they were willing.
There's one other thing. One of the people on our team, he motioned to himself and Tony, turns into a guy about the size and strength of your people. There have been a lot of problems. The way it happened wasn't natural. People reacted very badly to the appearance of the big guy, and it really didn't help that the big version of the man didn't, for whatever reason, get all the little guy's knowledge. Things have calmed down now, and we've started working with him. But that whole, our stuff is not built to withstand this level of strength thing is still there. So no one has any idea what the big guy can really do.
Bessler cocked her head to the side. You are hoping we might be amenable to working with him, to see what his full potential is.
Steve nodded. It won't be for a while, he admitted. He has a tendency to get violent if he feels at all threatened, whether or not there's an actual threat present, thanks to people reacting badly to him at first. I don't think he'd react well coming here just now, but in a few months maybe he'd be far enough along to understand and not get upset.
What is the name of this man?
Bessler wanted to know. The little guy is Bruce Banner. The big guy calls himself Hulk, Steve told her. He's right about your height and a really bright green and really, really muscled.
Such is the usual case for our soldiers and those that protect the various tribes as they wander the realm, Bessler said. When he is ready, I will arrange for him to meet and work with some of our men from that group, since they'd be of at least roughly comparable strength and abilities.